So what I want to talk to you about today is an area that I just feel is so exciting, and it's so great for this conference because it's all about the art of possibilities. When I actually started my career, I came out of college with a degree in chemical engineering, and I really wanted to work on alternative energy. I thought solar was really cool. We'd looked at it a little bit in the classroom, but it was 1984, and oil was really cheap, and I couldn't find a job in any kind of new or alternative energy. And instead, the hot topic was Superfund. Anybody know what Superfund is? We had great acronyms at EPA. We had the LUS program, which was the Leaking Underground Storage Tanks. But I went to the Superfund program because it was the one place people were hiring, and I ended up spending the first couple of years of my career cleaning up hazardous waste sites. This was my site, New Bedford Harbor. We went out, we did a lot of data, we wrote reports, we had a lot of serious meetings, I spent a lot of time with the Corps of Engineers, but it was all about fixing past mistakes. And when I came back after graduate school to doing more work, what I really wanted to do was think about what's possible. How do we rethink the way we do things? And we started a program which was helping businesses rethink the way they did business. How can you change your operation so that it not only still makes sense for your business, but you actually lower your environmental footprint? And our first guinea pig was McDonald's Corporation. This is me and my colleague who has a PhD in molecular biophysics and biochemistry. We were told that in order to really understand the business, we had to work in a store for a day. So we went behind the counter, where our job was to dress the buns. Now, this is not an easy job because you have 6 different sandwiches, and each one gets a shot of ketchup, a shot of mustard, one gets 1 pickle, one gets 3, one gets a slice of onion, one doesn't. It's very complicated. So we grew to have a new appreciation of this company. But, of course, what was more important is at the end of the day, we found a way for McDonald's to reduce their waste by about 40% initially, and a lot of those solutions had energy implications. We had the corrugated industry came into our first meeting. We were sitting there with McDonald's. We were an environmental group, Environmental Defense Fund, and they said, oh, we can't possibly make a cardboard box, a corrugated box, with recycled material in it because it'll collapse. You can't do that. And then we had a little supplier come in and say, well, actually, we've done it. Can we just show it to you? And so McDonald's took that box and they put it through all their testing, and lo and behold, it worked. It was fine. And so within a year, we saw every single one of the suppliers for McDonald's changing. So they, too, had recycled material in their corrugated, and then the whole industry changed. And now you can't find a cardboard box without at least 40–50% recycled material. That's important because that saves more energy than almost anything else you can do, because making paper is the 3rd largest energy consuming industry in the US. So you have to think creatively and think from the bottom up. But what we were all about was really thinking about how do we transform markets kind of one customer at a time. Another project we did was with FedEx, where we were really intrigued by hybrid technology, and clearly Japan had gotten out ahead. They were really dominating the passenger car market and so on. But we looked around and we saw the fact that a lot of kids in urban areas were having rising rates of asthma. That was from a lot of urban air pollution. One of the culprits is idling delivery trucks. Of course, it's any kind of idling car, but certainly all those delivery trucks that idle. And we started thinking about, well, why couldn't we take that technology of hybrid engines, which uses about half as much gas as maybe a typical engine, and put it in a truck? Why can't we do that? And so we went to FedEx, and they said, well, we're willing to work with you and put out kind of a call to action. If you make it, we will buy it. And that was the key, being able to say to folks. And of course, we were nervous that maybe 1 or 2 companies would come in and say, we're interested in trying to make this new vehicle. We had 22 teams vying for this project, vying to make the first prototype of a hybrid car. This is a picture in California with the governor where they were launching the first fleet. But we now actually are dominating this market globally. We have 14 major suppliers. We have moved out first. We've beaten China, Japan, other countries, and this is a really exciting area. A project that failed, we were also thinking, well, we're getting really good at this. Let's try and just change the whole paper industry. Let's get a group of companies together that buy a lot of paper. So we went to Time Inc., we went to Bank of America, Johnson & Johnson, McDonald's, again, all these companies that buy a lot of paper. We got them to all get together and say to the paper industry, we want paper that's got recycled content that uses low chlorine or ozone bleaching technologies. We want a different kind of paper. The problem was it took us 2 years to really get through a lot of the technical issues on this and what was feasible. And in that time, what we hadn't thought about was it became a seller's market. So when this happened, the major paper companies said to Time, oh, well, you don't like our paper? Fine, we'll sell to somebody else. And Time panicked because you can't put out a magazine without paper. So we didn't get the change we wanted here, and this was one of the failure areas that we always think about, making sure that we understand the market dynamics. I'm telling you all of this because I spent the first half of my career working with businesses to think about how to change industries. And we now are at a point in the US where we have to change our entire economy. We have an economy that runs off of an energy system that not only creates a huge amount of carbon pollution, it uses also a lot of water. It is not sustainable by any definition of the word. We have got to change how we use energy. We've got to conserve more. We've got to put all the options on the table for generating new kinds of electricity, new kinds of fuels. You just heard a great example of a really exciting new field. We have got to put those all on the table, and we've got to visualize for people how we can get to this new economy. Unfortunately, in Washington, nobody wants to hear about the big picture, what we need to do for our nation. They want to know about jobs. And so I have spent a huge amount of time thinking this past year about how do we visualize what this new economy looks like, not just in terms of the technologies that it might bring in, but also how do we visualize it in terms of jobs. And that's what I'm going to share with you just a little bit here. We spent time looking around and saying, first of all, let's make sure people understand, and you guys know this because you're probably a lot of business folks in this audience, that it's not just about having some installation jobs to put up a new solar panel. It's a huge supply chain. In fact, often 70% of the jobs and the value added and what's good for our economy is in the supply chain. But people in Washington don't see that. They don't think supply chains. They don't know what supply chains are. They just think about, well, let's put some solar installers out there. So we decided we had to start actually visualizing this for folks. We knew that there were 8,000 parts in a wind turbine, but how do we make that really real for folks? This actually is a picture of the president on his way to the inauguration, visiting a supplier of one of those 8,000 parts. That's a 25-pound bolt on the table. And this is a company that was selling into just other industrial sectors, and their business was kind of soft, and they discovered that when you build wind turbines, you actually need a lot of these 25-pound bolts. And so they were able to move into this new market and have really sustained the recession very well because they found a new market they could sell into. One of my favorite examples is windows. Windows is something that's a great energy efficiency strategy. A lot of energy is lost because we don't insulate our homes well, and we don't have windows that are tight enough to really also provide that insulation. How many folks here were ever involved in a business where you did some type of building supply? We've had a couple folks here. So it's a really, you think of a window, you think it's just, wood and glass or vinyl and glass, that it's not much going on here. But if you actually start breaking it down and looking at the raw materials, the components, the finished products, the retailers and the wholesalers, you suddenly see a huge number of raw materials that are involved in one of these high-performance, energy-efficient windows. This is a lot of different materials that you wouldn't think of as being involved in making one of these windows. There's 7 major components. So in addition to the traditional ones, you need a special coating so that you can make sure that the sun that's coming in is reflected and doesn't heat up an area you don't want heated up. You need to be able to take 2 panes of glass and put insulating gas in between them. You need spacers so that the glass doesn't collapse on itself. All of these different parts are made by companies all over the US. Air Products in Pennsylvania, which is a traditional industrial gas company, makes gas fills for these energy-efficient windows. And then, of course, when you go into the finished product stage, you see familiar brand names here. These are all companies that are really hurting because of the slowdown in construction, but they're all companies that also could be starting to sell a lot of these energy-efficient windows, and the same with the retailers. So you realize very quickly, it's not just a window, there's a lot of economic opportunity there, and that's what we began to really try and communicate to a lot of folks in Washington. Particularly, you can imagine some political types that might be interested in what this means for my district or what this means for my state. These are maps. We wanted to really make this very visual for folks. And so this is a map of where the window manufacturers, and as you'll notice in these maps, the Midwest is really a place where a lot of what you might think of as old economy businesses are actually very much at the center of what could be a whole new way of doing business in energy efficiency and in clean energy. So this is windows. Here's a map of wind. I talked about that earlier. Here's a map of a bunch of different component suppliers for wind. Wind, of course, is everyone's favorite story to talk about, but it's one of several hundred solutions that we have to have in this area. So I don't want you to think that it's the only one. It is a mix. We've got to have everything you've heard about this morning has got to be on the table. This one just happens to be one where there's more data than some of the other areas, so it's an example that gets used a lot. LED lighting. LED lighting is another really terrific example because early on when the president was out talking on the campaign trail, he talked a lot about, let's all put in compact fluorescent bulbs, let's change our light bulbs. Do people remember when he was sort of talking about that early on in the campaign? During the transition period, we worked some at the transition team, and we said, compact fluorescent bulbs are all made entirely in China. I'm not sure that's the thing that we want to be promoting right now, particularly when we have something that's even more efficient, very close to being ready, commercially ready. We make a lot of it in the US, and it's a much better solution because it doesn't contain mercury. And I'm happy to say that I think they did shift, and a lot of the tax credits that are out right now are for windows and insulation for energy efficiency, but not for compact fluorescent bulbs. Cree is a company that's in the US, and Cree, when China was building its Green Olympics and wanted to showcase to the world its technology, they wanted to make everything LED lighting. And this is the outside of the water cube and the bird's nest. Both were very spectacular LED lighting. All of those lights came from a US company. We were the innovation leader. They could not find in China what they wanted, so they had to come to the US. And of course, it makes a huge difference in terms of the number of employees at Cree because they're benefiting from the fact that they're selling globally all of these products. So these are a group of steel workers. A wind turbine takes 6,500 tons of steel to make one of these. The steel workers want to see us moving to this new low-carbon economy, and these are actually a bunch of union steel workers that did an ad for us trying to get folks to think about the connection between this low-carbon economy and so on. This is another ad we've done where we've tried to take all of these opportunities and make sure that people see what the economic potential is. So you take all those LED companies, the window companies, the wind companies, and you put them all in one state. And it's actually a lot of opportunity that's waiting, that's there, companies that are poised, they're ready to grow, but they're not getting enough customers right now. We actually have done a website. I didn't think I had time to do an interactive display, but I really recommend everybody go and look at Florida, which we have mapped, and see all these dots represent individual companies that are real companies on the ground. We survey them. We know that half of them are having growth in sales right now, but only about 20% of them are actually hiring new people because they're nervous. They don't know what to do. They don't know what's going to happen to the US. We can't seem to make up our mind. We're sort of meandering our way through, and we're seeing that there's a real paralysis. This is an example of how you can use the website to tell the story of an individual company. There was a mention earlier of the fact that a lot of these wind turbines don't work at certain speeds. This is a company that has an idea of how to take carbon fiber, make a new blade that's much more like an airplane wing, which then means you can embed sensors on the wing, which then means you can control the blade. I'm sorry, not the wing. You can control the blade. It's made using the same kind of technology you do airplane wings. But you can start to run these turbines now at very low wind speeds, at very high wind speeds. You just turn the blade in a way that makes it all work. So there's so many incredible innovations going on out there. But we, as I said, are meandering our way, and at the same time, we're seeing just incredible speed going on in China and other places. China's dominating in some of these new markets, solar PV, batteries. Other areas, rare earth metals is a critical raw material for a lot of these new markets, batteries, solar, other stuff. China is right now tying up most of the market for those. They're doing it. They're saying to folks, if you want to actually use these rare earth metals, you need to open your manufacturing here in China, create the jobs here. That's a big problem for us. They're not even looking at renewable portfolio standards. They're just saying if you make it, we'll buy it. Any renewables that are made must be purchased in China. This is just the solar market where we had been doing pretty well in market share, about 30%. We're now at about 6%, and China's now got about 30% of market share for solar. This is Senator Graham, who has been one of the leaders in Washington trying to move us to this no-carbon economy, just also reflecting the fact that we don't have time because we've got a lot of competition here. And of course, you know, the amount of money we're spending on oil imports is money that could be redeployed and reinvested in some of this next generation, and I'm not going to go into that here, but that is an opportunity. These are some images from Florida, and I'm putting these up here because, as you noticed, I've yet to mention climate science. Everything we've been talking about is jobs, economic opportunity, and yet where this all started was with the climate science. The climate science is still incredibly strong. The National Academy of Sciences is incredibly strong. There are, you know, always new opportunities for the climate skeptics to try and tell their story in a different way, but it's very strong, and it is undoubtedly the reason that we need to be doing this for our children and grandchildren. So we need to create common purpose around this. This is just a quick slide showing that when you focus on narrow renewable portfolio standards and other tools which pick the solutions, you actually miss a huge amount of potential private sector investment, which is the only thing we have that can really match what China's government is putting in. China's putting in $440 billion this year into clean energy. We only put in $80 billion. We've got to get our private sector leveraged, and we need to put a price on carbon in order to do that. And a price on carbon means everything you've heard about this morning is going to be on the table if it's got a low carbon this just shows how much 98% compound annual growth rate in markets when it went to a strategy that focused on a price on carbon as opposed to picking just renewables as the only solution. I'm just going to end by saying that in terms of, you know, the new ideas, what's big and new out there, I do believe a price on carbon is going to put everything on the table, and you're going to see a simple thing like a wastewater treatment plant. We have those in every community in the country. That plant can be turned into a mini energy plant. You can take the biosolids that are left from that plant and you can convert them into algae for a new type of fuel. You can capture the methane and convert it into electricity. You can do microhydro at the outflow pipes because there's already a good steady stream of water energy coming out, and you can capture that water energy. You can do solar and wind. You can completely remake that wastewater treatment plant if there is a priority in this country to move to a low-carbon economy. Right now there isn't, and that wastewater treatment plant looks pretty much the same today as it did 20 years ago. So I'll end with that note, and thanks everyone for your attention, and I'll be around, happy to talk to folks.